Hello everyone, thank you very much for choosing to come to this talk. I'm Sebastian Leśniewski. I'm a senior lecturer and part of the foundation year team at Bloomsbury Institute London, and my today's talk will be about assessment. If you scan the QR code that you can see on the first slide, you can download the slides that I'll be using today. This QR code will be visible in the next couple of slides, so if you don't manage to scan it just yet, don't panic. Oh yeah, everyone is okay. Okay, so I want to begin my today's talk with a quote from this book titled Teaching International Foundation Year, a practical guide for EAP practitioners in higher and further education, which came out in 2022. It's quite an enjoyable and refreshing read, although in the preface I came across this statement. So the sentence might seem fairly innocuous. However, I actually don't find it innocuous, and in my today's talk I want to challenge it. But before I argue my point, I think I need to tell you about the context I'm coming from. So I work at Bloomsbury Institute London, a higher education provider specializing in 3 disciplines: business, accounting and law. We deliver bachelor's and master's programs. Most of our students come from the widening participation backgrounds, so people who may be returning to education after a break, people who may not have A-levels, people whose first language might not be English, people who might not be very highly computer literate. Such individuals have the option of taking the foundation year, which consists of 2 11-week terms. And each term they study 2 core modules. In term 1 they have a core module, study and research skills, of which I'm the module leader. The other core module is called contemporary world. Then in term 2 they have 2 other core modules, one called communication, and the other depends on what the given student will be studying when they move on to year 1. So if they are going to study law, then they have a core module, introduction to law. If they will be studying accounting, they have a core module, introduction to accounting, and so on. So I'm mainly involved in the foundation year, although I do also supervise bachelor's and master's students in their research projects. As I said, I'm the module leader for study and research skills. In the course of this module, the students learn basic academic skills such as assessing, evaluating credibility of a source of information, summarizing an article, capturing the main ideas from it, paraphrasing, synthesizing information from multiple sources, referencing. They also learn the basics of market research, and they use a range of digital tools. Within this module there are assessments in weeks 5, 8 and 11. The structure of each module is that there is a lecture, followed by a seminar and a workshop. So that's altogether 6 hours per week, times 2 because there are 2 core modules, for 11 weeks. All these sessions are delivered face-to-face. The lectures are also video recorded, and they are made available for the students to watch on our virtual learning platform. And I've been looking at the statistics of how many times those video recordings of lectures were watched. So here we're looking at the term that started in January 2022, a year ago. Yeah, you can already see where it's going, right? Lecture 1 was viewed 37 times, and lecture 10 was viewed 15 times. Just to put these numbers in context, we're talking about a cohort of about 50 students, and these videos are only available to, so it's not on YouTube publicly available, otherwise these numbers would be really embarrassing. So yeah. Now, apart from those video recordings of lectures, I also, in the course of the module, started to record videos giving instructions on how to do particular assessment tasks, I was motivated to do it as I was often approached by students asking how to go about a specific assessment task, even though it was all explained in the study booklet, it was explained in the lectures. So I thought that perhaps I could record a video of myself explaining it, so that next time a student asks me about assessment, I can just give them a link to my video. And yeah, so assessment 1 consisted of several tasks, and I recorded a video explaining how to do task 2, which was to evaluate credibility of a short online article. And as you can see here, that video had 82 views. In brackets you can see the length of the recording, so this one was 31 minutes long. You can also see the lengths of the lecture recording, so they are 1 hour 24, lecture 1, 1 hour 9 minutes, lecture 10. Below you can see a few other videos giving instructions on how to go about a particular assessment task. Here are some screenshots of what these videos would look like. So at the top is a frame from a video recording of one of my lectures, so that's me in the lecture theatre. And below is a frame from one of my instructional videos, that's again me, this time at my home, sharing my computer screen, pointing to things, explaining where to find things, and also talking the students through an example answer to the task. So the pattern that is emerging here is that the videos explaining assessment tasks had more views than the lecture recordings. Well, if we look at the numbers, they might not, if you look at the difference between the numbers of views of these two types of video contents, they might not seem overwhelming, but I ran the t-test to compare the averages, and this difference is actually statistically significant. So this tendency could be explained by the fact that, at least in theory, the students would have already been to the lecture, they should have some notes from the lecture, maybe therefore they don't have a need to watch it back. On the other hand, the lectures did include information about assessments. The course is actually designed so that the contents of the lectures are aligned with the assessment tasks. So there would be a reason for the students to go back to those lecture recordings. This relative popularity of those instructional videos could also be linked to their length. So as you can see, they are considerably shorter than the lecture recordings. Another factor that could have some effect is that the instructional videos had better sound quality. So the sound in the lectures was picked up by the mics on the lectern, whereas to record my instructional videos, I used my professional condenser mic. One other difference between these two types of video contents, probably the key difference, is that those instructional videos included indicative answers. So I was talking the students through example answers to the tasks. So if I were to summarize why the students tended to see those instructional videos as more useful, I mean, why these videos were more popular, it's because they probably found them more useful. They might have seen them as more useful. So, in the next term, which began in June, there was a new cohort of students. And this time I decided to gauge the students' attitude towards, towards different types of video contents available to them through a survey. In the course of this module, the students learn to design an online questionnaire, and one of the activities that they did in class began with them filling in an online questionnaire before they created one themselves. And one of the questions I got them to answer was this. So the students were only able to pick one answer. What do you think was the most popular answer?
Second one.
You guessed it, yes, 15 students out of 46 said that those instructional videos were the most helpful. 12 indicated the video recordings of lectures, and so on. If we convert these numbers into percentages, this is what they look like. So that's another piece of evidence suggesting that the students tend to prioritize their assessment tasks. Once I noticed that the students appreciated those videos, I continued to record them. I think I got better at it. And then in the following term, which started in October 2023, I saw a similar pattern. So the lectures were viewed between 7 and 22 times, and the instructional videos had considerably higher numbers of views. This time we're looking at a bigger cohort, so it was about 120 students. So all this evidence seems to support what you probably already experienced as teachers. I definitely noticed a long time ago that whenever it's a little difficult to get the students' attention in class, as soon as I mention that the thing we're talking about now is likely to come up in your exam, they immediately start to listen. It's a great way to get their attention. Oh yeah, one more thing. The difference is statistically significant again. So yeah, it is a great way to get their attention. People just want to pass. And this brings me to the quote that I began with and I want to challenge. So what they are saying is that we're not just teaching our students to pass a test, we're doing so much more than this. Suggesting that there is a difference between preparing to pass an exam and acquiring a set of useful skills. As if preparing to pass an exam was something less valuable. Well, of course it can be. Does anyone recognize the young man in this photo? This is Eric Arthur Blair, better known as George Orwell. Born in 1903, at the age of 8, he was sent to a boarding school in Eastbourne, and apparently that was a very traumatic experience for him. Later, as a grown-up man, he described his time at the boarding school in an essay titled Such Were the Joys, which was published in 1947. If you haven't read it, please do. It's really brilliant. I'm going to show you a short extract from it. You managed to read it? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this is a situation where the teachers are teaching their students to pass an exam, and this is a very bad sort of teaching. So the students are trained to memorize the information they don't understand. Hello. Regurgitate that at the exam, and that inflates the school's achievement statistics. So if this is what we mean by teaching to pass a test, then I'm not going to argue that this is a good thing. This example is from more than 100 years ago, but this sort of thing unfortunately still happens in various parts of the world. If you have watched the HBO series The Wire, you might remember a more recent example of teaching to pass an exam. So the character in the center has recently become a teacher, and the school management is telling their teachers that the school needs to improve its achievement statistics, and therefore the teachers have to teach their students exam questions, to memorize exam questions and answers, to artificially inflate the results. Again, that's not the sort of teaching to pass a test that I'm going to argue in favor of. Well, let me give you an example from my own experience as a teacher. So I once had a student who needed to take the GESE exam. Grade 5 is equivalent to the B1 level. This is a speaking and listening exam, which consists of 2 parts. In part 1, the candidate talks about a topic that they've prepared. It could be about their work, their hobbies, their everyday lives. In part 2, the examiner asks some follow-up questions, and it's more of a free conversation. So my student was a builder. He was able to communicate in English, but he made a lot of errors, including pronunciation errors, which would often lead to misunderstandings. So it was kind of touch and go. Maybe he would pass this exam, but he could as well fail it. So I coached him. It just so happens that we share the same first language. So he was able to tell me stuff in Polish, and I was able to turn that into fairly eloquent English, such as this. So I got my students to rehearse this stuff over and over again. We paid a lot of attention to the pronunciation, to the strong and weak forms, to the distribution of stresses. So I got him to say the project that we've been working on for the past 10 years, putting the stresses in the proper places, and yes, he passed with merit.
Well done.
Now, was this cheating? Did I coach my students to perform a confidence trick, a bit like what Orwell was writing about? Did I prompt my students to memorize, to learn exactly those things that would give an examiner the impression that his English was better than it really was? Well, I kind of did. But this story has an interesting epilogue. At the time when my student was preparing for his exam and rehearsing and memorizing his lines, his work colleagues started to say, "Your English has suddenly improved. You're using all this vocabulary. You're so fluent. What the hell happened? What's going on?" So the point I'm making is that that student was taught to pass a test. But at the same time, it resulted in good learning outcomes. And this is what I'm arguing. There should be no difference between teaching to pass a test and equipping the student with a set of useful skills. If teaching to pass a test is not good enough, then there's something wrong with that test. This leads to the concept of ecological validity, which I included in the title of my talk. I'm sure everyone in the room knows what ecological validity is, but I'm going to briefly explain it anyway. So validity together with reliability are 2 basic concepts in research. We want our research to be valid. If our research measures what it intended to measure, then it's valid. We call that internal validity. There is also external validity when we can extrapolate our results beyond the sample that we've investigated. And then there is ecological validity, which is about whether our research wasn't too different from what happens in real life. So when doing research, we nearly always have to do something that's a bit artificial. It's almost impossible to investigate things in the wild. For example, if I wanted to investigate if drinking coffee makes people more aggressive, the way I could set up such a study would perhaps involve having 2 groups of participants, one of whom would drink coffee while the other would not. Then maybe I could present them with some scenarios, maybe show them some videos, and ask, what would you do? To see which group would declare more aggressive reactions. Now, am I investigating the aggression? What I'm really investigating is some declarations about aggression. And that's often inevitable in research, right? If you want to have the ethical approval and so on. Research has to be designed in a way that is actually doable, operationalizable. Now, if what we do in research is too far removed from what normally happens in real life, then we say that there is a problem with the ecological validity of that research. So ecological validity is about the gap between lab and life, and we just don't want that gap to be too big. So one of the reviewers of my proposal asked why I chose this term, ecological validity. Is it suitable in this context? Well, to be honest, I chose this term because I think it makes a catchy title for the talk. But it could also be replaced with the word relevant. So what I wanted to argue is that assessment should have the ecological validity, or in other words, it should be relevant. Because, the point I made earlier, assessment is a great opportunity to harness our students' engagement. Now, you might be thinking that I'm arguing in favor of extrinsic motivation. So there is intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic or internal motivation is when you do something because you really want to do it. And extrinsic motivation is you do something because someone makes you do it. There are some external factors that force you to do it. So there is quite a lot of research into it, and most of this research tends to find that intrinsic motivation is more likely to lead to good learning outcomes in the long term. And this is also what common sense would tell us, right? If somebody forced you to study medicine, but you don't really want to do it because deep inside you've always wanted to be a lumberjack, then you're not going to be a good doctor. However, it's a little more complicated than this. There is also research which found that neither type of motivation is correlated with learning achievement. And also I recently came across this systematic review which questioned whether these two types of motivation can really be separated. The authors come to the conclusion that perhaps they can, because apparently different regions of the brain are activated when you're extrinsically motivated and when you're intrinsically motivated. But the authors also conclude that these two types of motivation constantly interact. So for example, let's say that I really want to learn Spanish because maybe I met an absolutely gorgeous Spanish-speaking lady, so that would be intrinsic motivation. But then, if I want to make some progress with my Spanish, what I might do is sign up for a course, so that somebody gives me regular homework, and ideally I would want that course to end with an exam, so that I would have a deadline that would push me to do some work. So is that intrinsic or extrinsic motivation then? When we talk about assessment during the foundation year, it would be an oversimplification to just say that assessment equals extrinsic motivation. Because that's a consequence of the fact that a given student has enrolled on a university course, which was probably intrinsically motivated. So when I argue that assessment needs to be relevant, because this is a great opportunity to harness our students' engagement, I'm not arguing in favor of extrinsic motivation. So it's about time to wrap it up. So I want to share one more piece of wisdom. Right, so yeah, that's me. These are my references. If anyone would like to make a comment, ask a question, I'm all yours.